Hello, everyone. This is James Crook. If you start listening to the episode, you'll notice that I forgot to do the legal disclaimers. So I'm going to do them right now. Scott is only licensed to practice law in Utah and Idaho. He is not giving specific legal advice. This shouldn't be construed as legal advice for your problem. If you need specific legal advice, please go to an attorney, preferably this attorney. Thank you. Now you can enjoy the rest of this awesome episode. Thanks. All right. Welcome back to HR's Best Friend. We are so excited. We have a special guest today, Suzanne Lucas. First, I'm going to play you our HR's Best Friend brand new intro music. And then we have some special intro music that's just specific to Suzanne. So here we go.
When you're lost in a world of legal war, and you don't know which way to go, there's a hero waiting with expertise to lend. The Utah employment lawyer, HR's best friend. Ooh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
He's the advocate of
So there's our new intro music.
That's amazing.
I know.
I love the fact that I am a hero. That's my favorite part.
Yeah.
And
All lawyers, heroes, positive vibes towards all lawyers for sure.
all I had to do for that was there's this tool you can see if you're watching on YouTube. You can see it's suno.ai, free advertising for them. I just put in a prompt, write a swooner song about the Utah employment lawyer, HR's best friend, and it just generated that. So now Suzanne's prompt was, I think it was like upbeat rap song about the evil HR lady.
well, she's the queen of HR. Evil, listen up, I got a story to tell about a lady named Suzanne, known so well. She's the queen of HR. Evil, they say, but let me lay it down. She's got her own way. She's the lady in charge, making moves and decisions with a heart full of care and a mind for precision. She knows the game, she's got the power, but she's always looking out for her employees every hour. Suzanne Lucas, the evil HR lady, but she's got that kindness, driving her crazy. Don't let the name fool you, she's got that fire. The lady of HR, taking it higher.
So there we go.
I have to say, this is the first time anybody's ever written me a song.
I know. I wish I could say that it was really a complicated process.
Pretend,
was-
James, pretend. It took me 6
Yeah.
years.
Well, if you want the rights to that, it's just $5,000. So
Yeah,
no, you can
not
you
a
can
rich
have
lawyer.
no, you can. I mean, for $10, you can go to suno.ai and you could make a very similar version. All right. Anyway, Suzanne, please, you are the evil HR lady, but tell us what that means. Please introduce yourself.
Well, the evil HR lady term comes because if you get called into your boss's office and the HR lady or gentleman, but 70% of the time it's going to be a lady, is sitting there, how's that meeting going to go? Exactly. And so that's the view people have of HR. They see us associated with all of the bad stuff, and people don't really understand what we do behind the scenes. So the name is making kind of a play on that of how people view HR. And so I do all things HR. I write about HR. I give keynote speeches about HR. I teach webinars about HR, and I do training. And right now I do training combining improvisational comedy with HR and leadership tools.
Well, that is awesome. And we're so grateful that you would join us today. I personally follow you on LinkedIn and have seen a lot of your content, and it's all very good.
Oh,
And the only thing worse then going into the office is with the HR lady is if the employment lawyer happens to be there too. You know, there's
That
big trouble.
that is even worse. Even worse. Then you might as well not even wait for what they're going to say. You can just say, thanks so much. Should I pack my desk, or would you just like to send it to me?
I represent a lot of employers, but I also represent executive level employees as well. But I always tell my employer clients that I feel really bad once I get known in the organization, because every time I come in the door, people immediately start whispering to each other who's in trouble, you know, and I feel like I should be wearing a Darth Vader suit. So
Absolutely.
You know, growing up, Dad, we kind of felt that way at home whenever you walked into a room.
There you
Oh,
go.
yeah.
All right. Moving on. We have a few questions.
All righty.
So, the first one, what is the most tricky thing for HR to deal with generally?
I mean, there's so many tricky things in HR because you're dealing with people. You know, if you're dealing with manufacturing, either the product gets made or it doesn't. And there's a lot of complicated things. I'm not downgrading the complicatedness of it. But at the end of the day, you can say, look, we made 100 widgets. Look what we accomplished. HR, because you're dealing with people, it's really hard to measure and to show the value because HR, we like to say, is like the CIA. When it's good, you don't even know they're there. But when it's bad, boy, do you hear about it. And the problem with that is that when you're good, leadership's like, well, we don't need HR. Everything's fine. And you're like, no, it's fine because we're here. And they're like, well, we don't see you doing anything. And you're like, ah. So that's not really an answer to your question. But I think the most complicated thing is just dealing with people, and you never know what's going to pop up next.
Well, and you know, it's been my experience too, and I think this goes along with what you're saying, is that often, you know, HR is not seen as a you know, an income generating part of the enterprise. It's only looked at, you know, as a cost center, or
Right.
you know, and so often people don't until there's problems, people often don't recognize the value that a good human resources person brings to the table. And but the problem is that good human resource advice is extremely valuable.
I couldn't agree with you more. And good human resources advice will save you money in the long run, and make everybody happier at work, more engaged and more productive. So it really can be a benefit, but it's harder to show on a balance sheet. You know, with the widgets, you can say, this is how many widgets we made, and sales can say, this is how many widgets we sold. And HR can say, this is how many people we increased their engagement so that they work 10%. I mean, we can't really do that so well. But when things fall apart, they fall apart in a spectacular way.
Can you ever pull to things like turnover? I know, like it costs almost like $1 million for a hospital to replace a doctor.
Yeah, I mean, there are those things, absolutely, that you can look at turnover. You know, you can look at retention metrics. I actually started my career creating metrics way back in the 1900s. I actually worked for a grocery store chain on the East Coast, known as Wegmans, which is the best grocery store ever. And yes, it's better than Harmon. So there. Just thought I'd throw that in since you guys are in Utah. And I was their first metrics specialist. And HR metrics were a very new thing because up until this point, you didn't really have the HR data available. And the computer power that we have now. And now every company of any size has HR metrics. But way back in 1999, they didn't. And I was developing all of those things to try to demonstrate some of those costs and some of the impacts of programs can have on turnover, which is incredibly expensive.
Well, and it's interesting because metrics, of course, they measure things and they're important, but really I just found, so I've been doing employment law since I graduated from law school. In fact, I clerked for the BYU Office of General Counsel while I was going to law school there. And that's how I got interested in employment law. It had a lot of the attributes of constitutional law because you have a lot of the same analysis and under Title VII and that sort of thing as you do under, substantive due process or whatever, those types of claims. But in any event, it's all very interesting. But the fact is that because I was involved, I've started 2 or 3 law firms. I was always the guy that they used for HR until we got going.
Right.
And until and to me, it was more of a feel thing. Like when you brought in somebody who was super disruptive, and then you spent, like, as a lawyer, when I started spending half of my day dealing with all of the problems that were created by one person, you don't really, it's like people don't understand the value of it, and until they actually feel the value of it. And so it can be super frustrating because it's hard to sell, I think, to some people or to understand.
What if you were to do something like they do in The Office where Dwight starts the fire for fire preparedness? So what if you started something really disruptive and then you go, see, this is why you need me, because I prevent these kinds of things.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, Dwight was never really a good example of anything, right?
No, for beet farming, yes, very good example.
Yeah.
So
and maybe it's for wedding planning as well, maybe.
So
I don't remember that. It's been too many years since I watched The Office.
That is a funny subplot. Okay, so I have got some more questions on the script, but I am curious, how do HR and improv comedy go together?
Oh, I'm so glad that you asked. So there's many founding principles of improv comedy, but the biggest one we call yes and. So you do improv as a team and you work with the audience. So you don't know what's going to come up until it comes up, which is very much like HR, right? You plan, you practice, all of that, and then someone shows up in your office and is like, here we go, and tells you something terrible or something hilarious that you're not supposed to laugh at because it's terrible, but it's really funny. And so this principle of yes and in improv comedy is that if an ensemble member, the team member, or an audience member tells you something, you just have to accept it as truth. And you say, yes, and you go forward with that. So if I say, James, what a lovely cat you're holding, you can't say, I'm not holding a cat. You just...
But I'm not, though.
But on the rules of improv, you're like, oh, yes, and the cat's name is Fluffy. And you just have to go with it, right? And this seems like the opposite of what HR should do, because it's like we should be the ones saying, no, that's not a cat. That's, you've lost your ever-loving mind. But there's so much of HR that requires this yes and. people ascribe to us powers that we don't have. We enforce policy, we suggest policy, we may write the policy, but the final decision maker is the CEO, president, whoever, right? And oftentimes they come with us with crappy ideas. And we then have to be the cheerleader for that. And we can spend our lives whining and complaining about it, or we can say, yes, this is the policy, and now what? And try to implement it in the best way possible. Because focusing on why it was bad, you fight that battle behind the scenes, right? But once that's in place, it doesn't do the company any good. It doesn't do me any good to be like, well, this was the policy that Scott came up with, and it's so dumb, but we have to follow it, right? That's going to be so destructive to the company. I need to get on board and yes, and that. So that's one of the very basic ways that works together.
Oh, that does make a lot of sense. That's awesome.
So I have a couple of questions for you, and this is kind of in the obviously I'm focused on the legal parts of human resources, which makes me a curmudgeon.
Very fun at parties, yes.
Yeah, yeah. But my question, I wanted to focus some of this discussion about some issues, particularly that you find. I know now that you're consulting and doing a lot of that stuff, but when you were, actively engaged in embedded and trying to deal with some, frontline problems that just came to you, like you said, the yes and problems, right? I'm curious, what did you find were the most tricky legal questions that you would get? I know you weren't, you're not a lawyer, but you have to deal with a lot of the statutes and regulations that are set out there. But what did you find were really particularly sticky for you to have to deal with?
Well, I'm not a lawyer, and I don't play one on the internet. I did spend 4 years as a labor and employment law consultant in a pharmaceutical company. I reported into legal, but I'm not a lawyer. My degrees are in judicial politics because I thought that would be a brilliant way to live life. I don't really know. I got my undergrad in political science, and then what are you supposed to do? You go to law school, but I didn't want to be a lawyer.
Yeah,
so
because that's what Scott did.
Yeah, so, went to grad school. Anyway, so I do have a pretty strong background in understanding law, but I certainly don't have the law training that you have. And I don't want to be a lawyer because I don't want to be that ultimate responsible person. But the complicated things that come up and that continue to come up in my current role, where I focus more on training people, is the law is constantly changing. And one of the things for right now, there's still this movement towards working remotely, and people want to work remotely. And you get this vitriol when a company says, yeah, you can work remotely, but you need to stay in, say Utah. And they're like, why? Why can't I work in Tahiti? And it's like, because Tahiti won't allow you to, right? But like, that's the issue. You don't have a work permit to live there. You don't have, and then time zones. But time zones are the least of your worries. There's all of this stuff going on that people don't understand. What they see is this mean boss that's trying to control them and keep them within, X number of miles of the office or whatever. And in reality is like, we don't want to register our business in a different state. We certainly don't want to register it in a separate country. And there's employment laws that are very, very different from state to state. You guys are in Utah, and I'm pretty sure that you would prefer not to have employees sitting in California, because California is bonkers insane when it comes to employment law. And there's all of this stuff going on that especially small businesses can't afford. Google, they can afford it. They're fine, work wherever.
Right.
They've got entities in every country that you'd want to live in anyway. But I don't know, maybe you have this massive law firm with 40,000 people. I don't actually know. I didn't Google you. But you don't want to have somebody sitting in Iowa because you've got to apply then Iowa employment law. So that's a really tricky thing that people are dealing with right now, and companies are getting in trouble with. But those aren't very exciting things.
But that is a big issue, and it's like people really don't understand, and often employers actually don't understand that, even if you're headquartered in Salt Lake, for instance, and you allow remote work, if they're working in Idaho, you have to follow Idaho law for those people who are living in Idaho, and
Right.
and you have to pay taxes there, and you have to have workers' comp that's available there, and it is a real issue, and so it would be nice if things were simpler. Because remote work is nice. I mean, the fact that we can sit here and talk to you in Europe on this podcast is a perfect example of how flexible the world has become. And it would be nice to be able to do it more simply, but you have to think about everything. That's interesting. And I find too that most calls I get from my clients, from the HR department or the personnel department, depending on who it is, they relate to things like that. They also relate to, the intersection of FMLA, the ADA, workers' comp. I know that those are issues that come up a lot because people are trying to figure out, oh, well, FMLA has run out. Can we just now terminate an employee even though they could accommodate them, and what they have to do?
And those things, they're so simple on their face. Like, okay, here's you're qualified for FMLA. You've been employed for 12 months. You have 50 or more employees in a 75-mile radius, and you've worked, 1,250 hours in the past 12 months. And
Right.
then you get cancer. Okay, check. That's all done, right? And so that is that basic ideal case. But like you said, then you have all these border cases, and when does ADA play a role? And what about our intermittent FMLA? And okay, so I am entitled to 12 weeks of FMLA, and 12 times 12 weeks times 40 hours a week, that many hours intermittently, but I normally work 45 hours a week. So do I get, it starts to become more and more complicated. And of course, all of those little nitpicky things that can just blow up on you.
Yeah. When I also find too, and I don't know how you deal with this, and I wonder if you train about it, is, you'll have somebody, I'll have a client who will come and say, look, we're just tired of Jane, we're done with Jane. Jane's been ineffective for the last, year, and we want to get rid of her. And then the first thing I ask, of course, is for the performance, their performance reviews, right? And exactly what I'm going to say, right?
Yes,
The performance reviews are 4s and 5s because no one wants to hurt anyone's feelings, right? And so how do you deal with that? I mean, how do you teach people that they really have to have those hard conversations so that it protects the employer?
It's funny that you say that, because at the beginning of my career, I told you I started out in HR data, and then I moved into a role where I was responsible for ensuring that everybody in a 30,000 person company got an annual performance review, and that everybody got a raise, or didn't get a raise, but every box was checked off. If you didn't get a raise, we knew about it and there was a reason why we weren't giving you a raise. So I was responsible for running this program, and we had a forced ratings distribution. So 20% could be 5. I don't remember. 40% could be 4s, 40% could be 3s, or I don't remember. Anyway, 5% 2s, which were, where you're either out the door or we're pushing you out the door. And I hated it. I hated it because I was managing people, and my boss would come to me and would be like, you have 5 employees, you can give 2 of them 4s, and the other 3 need to be 3s, and you don't have any 5s this year. And I'm like, crap. But now that I'm removed from that, I can see the wisdom, because was everybody performing above expectations? Probably not. Was I innately nice? Yes. Did I not want to have tough conversations? Absolutely. But forcing me to rate people made me have to look at exactly who was doing what. And, and I could battle with my boss for more 4s or whatever. But because of the forced ratings distribution, if she gave me another 4, then one of my peers had to make her direct report a 3. Like there was this whole thing, and I hated it. I really hated it. And I'm still not a fan of forced rating distribution, but I see the wisdom in it, in forcing those conversations, because we're not all fantastic. What is Garrison Keillor said about Lake Wobegon, where all the men are beautiful, all the women are strong, and all the children are above average. Managers sometimes feel that way about their employees. Well, of course, my team is amazing. Your team is terrible. My team is amazing. And then we also are really, really bad at judging ourselves. And so, of course, I'm awesome. I know I'm awesome, right? So why am I not a 5? I'm awesome. And it could be real pressure if the manager doesn't have backup to be like, listen, you're 4 or you're 3. That's what you are. And here's why, because I need to have this documentation. And it can really be this tool to force. Now, people hate performance reviews, and I love performance reviews for the same reason that you do, is that it provides some documentation, because managers are terrible at documenting, terrible at it. I get I've had it with this person, they're late all the time, they're disrespectful, they're this, they're that, they're this. And I'm like, where's the documentation? Well, I've talked to her about it. Did you write anything down? No. Did you send her an email? No. Well, then you don't have any documentation.
Well, the interesting thing about that, not to get too bogged down in this, is that you could have people who are excellent, but they still can perform better in some areas, right? And so
right.
The fact is that performance review does not have to be all, flowers and chocolates, right? You can say you're a wonderful person and you're doing well on these things, and you should do that, right? I mean, you should tell people where they're excelling, but when they really need to improve or where they can improve, and it makes sense. It's just like when you hire somebody like as a first-year associate in a law firm, they're going to be really good at some things, but they're not going to be very good at some other things because they don't have the experience. And I do find it is hard, though, to get supervisors to rate people right. And I don't mean to drag this on, but I found in my role actually as a business owner and as somebody who manages other people, that I've actually been surprised at how, if you ask people to rate themselves in a performance review, I have been shocked sometimes at how close they rate themselves to how you rate them. That they actually do see where they're deficient and they identify it pretty well. And there's, once in a while there are outliers, but for the most part, people who are conscientious really recognize their weaknesses anyway, and they will say they are weaker. So I've been surprised by that. Anyway, not to, I know you have limited time, and I don't want to spend a whole lot of time talking more about performance review and boring everybody out, performance reviews and boring everybody about
Well,
them.
hopefully this audience would not be bored by performance reviews.
Oh, that's true.
They are putting us on their invitation list for their next parties.
Right. Well, I just have to say, you know, the childhood performance reviews that you made for me, Dad, were always pretty direct and scathing.
Oh man.
I have put my kids on performance improvement plans, so
The question is whether you put those, you know, you publish those on the, you know, the board on the fridge and stuff, so everybody else can see them.
the problem with putting a kid on a PIP is that if they don't improve, you can't fire them.
Yeah,
It's not at will employment.
Well, you can.
Not legally, James.
All right.
We
You have
ran
to
our
let them
household
age out.
differently.
We were often furloughed, but we're eligible for rehire.
Interesting. You'll have to tell me about your parental furlough program.
Yeah, it was not very generous. So now I'm a little nervous about this, Suzanne, but this is the next part is our forced rating distribution part of our show. I'm just kidding. We won't rate each other. But
Definitely
it is time to play illegal, actionable, immoral, and or normal. So just as a reminder, we run through a scenario or various scenarios, and the Utah Employment Lawyer tells us whether what you've described is illegal, actionable, immoral, and or normal, because these things are not usually mutually exclusive. So, Suzanne, do you have an experience from your HR life that you can anonymously, or I guess not anonymously, I wouldn't recommend that, but anonymously share with us that we can, that the Utah Employment Lawyer can judge?
All right. This came up yesterday.
Oh, wow.
So here's the situation. We have two employees. Employee A is a very conservative religious employee. Employee B is a transgender person. The very conservative religious employee says it's against my religion to use pronouns that do not reflect your biological gender. And the transgender employee says, I will not work with the religious employee. And the religious employee says, I will not work with the transgender employee. So is that situation illegal, immoral, normal, abnormal?
It's illegal, actionable, immoral, and or normal, but that's okay. It takes a while to memorize all that.
So that's a, you know, interesting question. And a difficult one to answer. So
I knew it would be difficult. That's why I asked it.
So I don't know how familiar you are with Utah law, so I'll explain something that's unique about Utah. That is
all right. I'm ready to hear unique about Utah law. I am a little bit familiar with Utah law. I would say I'm a native Utah, but I wasn't born there, but I grew up in Utah.
Well, interestingly, about 6 or 7 years ago, it may have been even 8 years ago, there was a compromise reached in Utah under the Utah Anti-Discrimination Act. And Utah became one of the first states that protected people for because of their sexual preference and also gender identity. But as a compromise to the parties that were, you know, part of that discussion, and they collected a bunch of religious leaders, but also other, small employers, governmental employers, and large employers. And as part of the compromise legislation, one of the things that was placed in the Utah law was that an employee could not be discriminated against for asserting their moral or religious convictions in the employment context, and in fact said that they could not be discriminated against because of their off-duty expressive conduct as well. So if they said something on Facebook or Twitter or something, which of course
it's called X now.
Oh, sorry. Anyway. So what this does is it creates an interesting it creates an interesting answer to that question, right? Because not only both employees in that circumstance are probably expressing their religious beliefs, and so for their expressive conduct, they probably would not be in trouble. In other words, they could, under Utah law, they would be protected in saying, I disagree with this person because I'm not going to use their pronouns or whatever. I don't want to. But if anyway, that's just a long way of saying it really makes it complicated in Utah. But but
it's a piece of cake in Iowa. So
if we separate by both employees, an employee refusing to address a person by their pronouns, if they were if they refuse to identify somebody by their pronouns, you have the Title VII protections for sexual for religious against religious discrimination. And if they could say that was a religious belief, and the newest case law that's out there might suggest that they would be protected and therefore it would not be illegal for them to refuse to address a person by their pronouns. But you would be forced as an employer to try and figure out some kind of way you could accommodate that religious expression. So you would have to work with them in figuring out how they could deal with that religious belief. If they couldn't if you couldn't come to an accommodation, then the employer might be in trouble.
For the transgender individual?
Now, to use the pronouns for the transgender individual. So, for instance, an accommodation might be, okay, you can't use the pronouns, but you must address them by their name only. That might be an accommodation that might work.
Right.
As for the transgender employee saying, I don't want to work with this person because they won't address me by my preferred pronouns, you've got a similar problem.
Right.
And
it's so balancing between the two things that,
So my answer to this question is it may or may not be illegal. And I would have to think more than the 5 minutes I've got right here to come up to a conclusion. It is certainly something that is not normal in the sense that you don't have to deal with this every day, but it is normal in the sense that this stuff will come up more often now.
It's absolutely stuff that comes up frequently in my realm, but
right.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting, and again, not to belabor this, but the first time I ever dealt with a transgender issue was actually representing a rural county in Utah where a person was transitioning, and never had dealt with that as a lawyer before. And I've been in practice, probably 15 years. We've dealt with transgender issues, but where it really became an issue, like on bathroom access, pronoun use, it came out of a very small rural community. And it was an issue that we had to deal with. And it was pre United States Supreme Court decision where I can't remember the name of the decision, where Justice Gorsuch was the writer who said, now we have to protect sexual
I want to say
preference.
That's probably not right.
Yeah. Anyway, it was before that, so it was an interesting issue. So anyway, that was a stumper because I can't give a really perfect answer, but it was a good question because it is something that we deal with all the time.
Sorry, I knew it would be a stumper because I don't think you could give a good answer without knowing more about the situation and how you could balance and what would be a reasonable accommodation. And so just two generic employees.
So, do these employees do they work in the same office, or is it a remote situation?
As far as I know, they're in the same office.
Because
I don't actually know all of the details.
Okay. Because I'm just thinking, if they are in the same office, couldn't you build some sort of bubble for both employees?
Yeah, that's a bad idea.
Wait, I'm not done. Okay. My role here is I'm playing the boss. Okay. And Suzanne is the HR rep and Scott is the attorney. Okay. So I am the business leader coming up with a solution. And my solution is, with the way that technology is going now, bubbles for both, and they're soundproof, but you've got a thing in there that takes in the audio, but it's smart enough to recognize the voice of the other individual, right? Okay, so it mutes that person.
I thought you were going to say
reasonable accommodation.
And I thought you were going to say, were you going to use AI technology to just change all the pronouns that came out of the mouth of the religious employee and into the right pronoun?
There you go.
Well, we could
like
do that.
Like on Star Trek, where they do the translation. I mean, you can do that with Google Translate somewhat now. So yeah, we just implement that from.
Hey, we may have come up with the next really good solution that we could sell.
Absolutely, and I want to cut
the anti-offense bubble.
Yes.
So,
yes, it's AI that translates everything into acceptable language for everybody. You put your settings in.
This is perfect. This is our $1 million idea, gentlemen.
I'll let you guys run with it. Okay.
We're writing you out. Scott and I are splitting it 50-50. You can get yours.
I will.
Your inheritance.
Just for a video audience, I did sketch this out. So, individual here.
Perfect.
This arrow represents the audio, and I didn't have enough time to illustrate the filtering of that. But anyway,
I love it. Yeah.
It's close. It's almost ready for prime time, I think. Anyway.
It's almost ready. Let's get funding. We'll get some venture capitalists. Yeah, we're good. Awesome.
Again, I'll let you guys. You can use my.
Well,
thank you, Suzanne. Thank you so much for being the guest on HR's Best Friend. Suzanne Lucas, the evil HR lady.
And you don't seem that evil to me.
I know. I'm unfailably nice. It's a problem, which is why I had to be forced to rate some of my employees as just meeting expectations.
You met our expectations today.
Thank you.
And you exceeded
guys met my expectations too. It's delightful.
Well, thank you.
we'll hopefully have you back again, and we'll keep in touch.
Awesome.
Bye.
Thanks.